It's the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 177. I am Mike Grimm, voice of the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to welcome a first-time guest to our podcast this week, and all it took for him to get on the show was to retire after 36 years of helping lead the Golden Gophers. Senior Associate Athletic Director Marc Ryan has had a tremendous run with Minnesota, has had so many memories over his 3.5 decades of service in various roles, and is one of the all-time great guys on top of it all. We have so many great stories to talk about, we won't get to them all, but I know you'll enjoy what we can get to this week with great guy Marc Ryan. Our Go Gopher Podcast is presented by alumni-owned Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Make the most of your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union is also a big sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast. Life math is complicated, and Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union makes it easier with local financial experts available to help in person or virtually. Go to affinityplus.org/Go Gophers for more info. The Go Gopher Podcast is also sponsored by onX Maps. Find out how to download the onX Fish app for free by listening to the Go Gopher Podcast. We're podcasting episode 177 from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We invite you to subscribe to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to subscribe and free to listen at any point. You can go back and listen to previous Go Gopher Podcast. Last episode, for example, we talked Golden Gopher track and field with the top 2 assistant coaches who helped the Minnesota men to a 7th place national finish a couple of weeks ago. This week, we're talking Golden Gopher athletics in general with some great specific stories with the retiring Marc Ryan. He'll join me next.
I'm Clay Geary, walk-on turned scholarship wide receiver for Gopher football.
And I'm Ben Utek, U of M alumni, Super Bowl champion, and Tony Dungy Uncommon Award winner.
We understand championship culture, which is why we're part of the True North family of companies.
True North invests in only elite teams, like the champion team at Sunbelt Business Advisors, Minnesota's largest seller of companies. To learn more about True North and our diverse family of independently owned companies, visit TrueNorthEquityPartners.com.
Keep the good times rolling without the regrets. Giggly THC beverages are your go-to for bold flavor and smooth vibes. Zero alcohol, no bad decisions. Just THC-infused cocktails, seltzers, and teas packed with natural ingredients and performance-boosting superfoods like ashwagandha and ginseng. Find Giggly at over 500 locations like Total Wine, MGM, and Cub Foods, or shop online at giggly.com. That's Gigli.com. Ready to upgrade your drink game? Use the code Giggly North, as in Giggly Talk North. Giggly North, Gigli North, for 50% off your first order. Giggly, sip smarter, feel better.
It's episode 177, and I am really thrilled to welcome to our show Senior Associate Athletic Director Marc Ryan, who has been around the block, and for the first time now since 1989...
Yes.
Marc Ryan will not be administering, sports informationing, whatever. You're 2 weeks into retirement, Marc. Thanks for coming on the show. That's all you had to do is retire to get on the podcast.
Here you are. That's what it takes,
that's
huh?
It. Yeah, that's it.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Thank you. So many good memories we're going to talk about here, and we're going to get to them down the road. But how is retirement going? You're coming up, approaching the 2-week mark already. Have you gotten used to it yet? What's it like?
It's different.
Yeah.
You know, you go, it's go, and so it's different, you know, especially when you look at 36 plus years making that drive in, you know, every day and not doing that. I don't know another way to say it. It's different, but I've had enough things to keep me busy. You know, to this point, and but it's been good. It's been really good. It's great to be back here on campus, and see so many familiar faces. I think we were going to start this podcast about 30 minutes ago, and we just have been running into people. It's been great. It's been awesome.
Well, and you, over 36 years, have crossed paths with so many people. You've been meaningful to so many people. Oftentimes, they say retirement is a time of reflection, and a lot of that is because people tell you what they've meant to you over the years. What has that been like to hear feedback from people now that you're into this, and people can tell you what influence you've had on them and what it's meant to be a coworker or a mentor or a coach, so to speak, in terms of the professional world of what you did?
Well, I don't know any other way to say it, Mike. It's just been really heartwarming. Just the number of people. You look at the number of people over 36 years that you've worked with and become friends with and build relationships with, and then you think of our student athletes, the thousands of student athletes that have come through here, and certainly now we're at a point where we've got children of former Gopher student athletes that either are here or have been here, and some of them have come through, and so it really. Like I say, it's been really heartwarming to see that and to hear those, just the many kind words that people have had, not just former Gopher Athletics staffers and student athletes, but people you've met in the profession, all around the country. Just the outreach has been very gratifying. We were just in the lobby here. We're taping this podcast on campus in the Bierman building, and just in the short time we were talking to people, I think you introduced me to 3 former student athletes or former interns who are now working either already in a full-time role here or other places. I mean, what kind of Marc Ryan coaching tree, so to speak? Is it kind of fun? And then someone else told you about somebody else, and you're like, I need her number. I got to reach out. So how about that part of it, the influence that way? Well, that's at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, right? And so to see, and maybe in some small way you've had an impact on their lives and their career, that's, really impactful. And so, because at the end of the day, it really is about the people. And that's what I love about Gopher Athletics. And obviously, we're in the Big Ten. We know we want to win. We want to win championships. But at the end of the day, it's about the people and about the relationships. And this has been an incredibly special place. I don't know any other way to say it. This was my dream to work here, and I've just been incredibly blessed to have the time, 36 plus years that I had here. Yeah. And again, we're going to talk about a lot of the memories and a lot of different things that you got to watch and be a part of, and in some cases even run as a director of certain games or championship events or what have you. In terms of retirement, take me through the decision as to when you decide, all right, I think, obviously you're in good health. You're still, avid. I know you were a track and field athlete back in the day, so you're still running and doing all that stuff. So certainly capable of still doing the job. Where does the decision come into, like, all right, I think the time has come to step away? Yeah, it was one of those things that it was shortly after the Final Four. Mark Coyle, our director of athletics, is on the NCAA men's basketball committee. So, the month of March and into April through the Final Four is, an incredibly busy time. It's always busy for him, but incredibly busy time for him. So I always knew, that when the time was right, that I would know. And I knew that the timing was right on multiple levels, personally and professionally. And so I met with Mark shortly after the Final Four and just said, Mark, I think it's time. And, I always wanted to be in a situation where I was able to call my own shot. Yep. And number one. And number two, maybe at the risk of maybe leaving a year too early rather than a day too late. Yeah. And kind of want to go out when I was still either at or somewhere near the top of my game. And so that was really, really important for me. And so I just knew the timing was right, like I say, on many levels, both personal and professional.
And do you now have an idea? Because you also, right, you want to enjoy now time where you got free time. No more, well, I shouldn't say no more. You'll go to events and games and all that, but weekends won't be so tied up now. And so do you have some thoughts on how you'll spend your time now without having to worry about the daily operation of an athletic department?
Well, yeah, a lot of thoughts. So, like, even this summer, I'm going fishing up in Canada, something I was never able to do. My wife and I are talking about a cruise in Alaska, if not this fall, next fall.
Yeah.
And that would be something that was just, a non-starter. So there are a number of things I want to do that I'm looking forward to doing. As you mentioned, I still... I have my health, and we have our health, and a lot of things on our list that we want to do. Certainly, one of the things is I've had season tickets to football, men's basketball, men's hockey since 1989, since I started. And in addition to all the other Gopher events that I've gone to as a staff member, I'm looking forward to going to those in a different realm, right? I'm looking forward to maybe tailgating with friends and family, before a football game, something I've never been able to do. And so there are a lot of things on the list. I don't know if I'd say this is a regret or not, but it's something I always say in life, there's no do-overs, right? But we have 3 kids, 3 awesome kids, Sean, Kira, and Kyle. And they all play basketball growing up. And I didn't miss many games, but if their game was at 7 o'clock, I was probably walking into the gym about 6:59.
Right.
And, I was never able to coach my own kids' teams because of my job at the U, and it involved a significant amount of travel and nights and weekends and so on and so forth. So that's one of the things I've talked about is maybe I might want to coach or help coach a youth basketball team with, obviously no relationship to any of the players, that are on the team. So a lot of things on the list. I think I still have a lot of gas left in the tank. I know there will be a next. There's some volunteer opportunities that, really interest me. So there'll be a next. I still want to be impactful. I still want to work with people, and especially young people, and hopefully make an impact on them.
Yeah, there's nothing that can energize you more than coaching a youth team, I don't think. And you'd be awesome at it. So I'm tipping my cap on that one. You better try that. Yeah, that'd be
Thanks,
great.
Mike.
I wanted to ask you, too, about a couple of things in terms of the decision, because it's such a changing landscape now in college athletics. You've got in recent years, well, the pandemic really, did different things and changed how we operate. Still, there's, how we operate is forever changed from that. And then you've got name, image, and likeness, and then you've got transfer portal, and that encompasses every sport at different varying levels. Did that part of it play into it, just the changing landscape, to say this is a different deal? Because there have been some coaches who stepped away that have said that's not for me, or was it just totally something other than that?
It was multiple things, and I would be, be truthful. That's a part of it, a small part of it. It's a little bit different than what I signed up for years ago, and that's okay. But personally and professionally, like I shared, I wanted to be able to call my own shot. Want to go out when I was still, I think, contributing, hopefully at a high level. Others could judge that better, certainly, than I could. And like I say, at the risk of maybe a year too early rather than a day too late, there were a lot of boxes in sports I worked with that I was able to check. Obviously, right out back of where we're sitting here is the new gymnastics practice facility, a new $14, $15 million facility. That was a big box to check. That was probably a 20-year journey to get to that point for that program. Our track and field programs, with the new outdoor track facility, still relatively new. That's another box that was checked. And swimming and diving, another 20-year journey for a dry land training for our divers. Working under who I would consider the best diving coach in the world, and Wen Bo Chen. They now have a dry land diving facility. And then softball, even we're looking at resurfacing the surface at softball. And so just was able to check a lot of boxes. Our daughter Kira just graduated with her master's in sports psychology from Wisconsin Green Bay. So that was 9 years of undergraduate and graduate college for our 3 kids. That's another box to check.
Yeah.
And so there are multiple reasons, so the environment, the landscape of college athletics, certainly that factored into it a little bit, but that was just one of several reasons, like I say, both personal and professional, why the timing was right for me.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, we're recording here in Beerman, so as you kind of figuratively walk away from it, what do you think the folks that are still here operating on a day-to-day basis, what are the challenges now as you look at it with your wealth of experience? If you could, and I'm sure you've offered up input to what the future holds, because it is every day something is new, it seems, in this crazy college sports world now.
Well, number one, it comes down to leadership, right? And I think we have a tremendous leader in Mark Coyle, and he's done a great job here during his time in Gopher Athletics. And I'm very confident in his leadership that Gopher Athletics will be positioned very well moving forward. On top of that, obviously, I'm incredibly biased with the senior staff that I was a part of, that Mark has on board. And again, it goes back to that great leadership, and then incredible coaches, great staff. I think Gopher Athletics is positioned really, really well to move forward in this, what I would say, new era of college athletics that, really kind of starts July 1 with the passage of the House settlement. Now that that's official, and then the revenue sharing can begin starting July 1. So at the end of the day, I still, my why has not changed and does not change moving forward. I still think that being a student athlete is a life-changing experience. I believe it's a transformational experience and that it changes lives. And I believe in that. And I think when we get to the other side of this, college athletics is going to look a little different, but it's still going to be incredibly impactful. When you think of and when I think of the number of student athletes that have come through here that maybe would not have had a chance to get a college degree, a life-changing, opportunity without college athletics, first-generation college students out of their families, on and on and on, the incredible success stories. I believe in that, and I don't think that will change. I know in some cases, probably some sports more than others, it's become a bit more of a transactional experience, but I still believe in that transformational opportunity that is college athletics and that a college degree. And in many cases now, our athletes are leaving not only with their undergraduate degree, but master's degrees as well. So where I've really seen that firsthand is one of the things I've been really fortunate to be able to work with is our Gopher graduation program. And that program is for student athletes that for whatever reason, they didn't graduate with their degree when they left the U. Many times it's in sports where there's a professional opportunity. And if there's a student athlete that was a high draft pick and they've been offered millions of dollars, that's hard to tell them not to accept that, right? The Gopher Grad program is an opportunity for student athletes for whatever reason to come back, and we provide financial assistance and academic support through J.T. Brewitt and his awesome staff in the Lindahl Academic Center to help them earn their college degree. We've had over 100 student athletes come back and earn their degree through that program. What I've seen firsthand is oftentimes there may be an athlete who's made millions in the pro ranks, and maybe they're an all-star or all-pro, whatever the sport terminology is for the success they had, and they get out and they realize they can't even coach their high school team, even though they're an expert in the sport, because they don't have that college degree. It shows just how impactful that is. Right. And so I believe in college athletics. Like I said, I know it's going to look different on the other side of this. There's great people in place here, certainly at the University of Minnesota and, throughout the country to make sure it remains a transformational experience moving forward.
Well, out in the lobby here, there's that great picture of Bobby Bell in his cap and gown all these years later. I don't remember. That had to be in the last, 10 years where he came back and got his degree and crossed the stage, which was pretty cool.
Bobby is, when you talk about the Gopher graduation program, and it was so incredible to, play a role in that, during my career here. One of the great success stories among many is Bobby Bell. Let's face it, Bobby Bell was one of the all-time great players here at the University of Minnesota. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame, Outland Trophy winner, went on and played in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. I told him several times that he broke my heart.
Yeah.
I'll be showing my age here a little bit, but I was just a kid, and we had Vikings season tickets. And I remember watching that Super Bowl, and the Vikings were huge favorites, right? It was the NFL against the AFL at that time, and the Chiefs dominated and won the game. And when you're, I think I was 6 or 7 years old. I remember I had to go walk around the block. At that age, you don't really. There's another game the next year, and the next year, that was like just devastating for me. But Bobby, had an incredible pro career, had a Pro Football Hall of Fame, everything you could imagine. You talk about a list of accolades. Been very successful in business. But what I thought was really cool is when Bobby was a young boy growing up in the South, he was obviously highly recruited, but at that time he could not stay and go to school as a black student. He could not stay in the South and go to school.
Yeah, SEC and ACC didn't have black athletes.
Right,
or didn't allow them into school.
Correct. And so he promised his dad when he left to leave for Minnesota that he would earn his college degree. And obviously Bobby had, like I mentioned, opportunities to go to the pros and do great things, but he never forgot about that pledge that he made to his dad, even though his dad had long since passed away. And so Bobby fulfilled that promise to his dad, came back to school. A lot of things had changed, technology and all that kind of stuff that through the program were able to guide him through that. But at the end of the day, Bobby did the work, and Bobby did what it took to fulfill that promise to his dad. And I think that's an incredible story.
What a story.
At the end of the day, he really didn't need the college degree, but he said he's going to do it, and he did it.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the transactional versus transformational part of it. I agree with you in that sense, and it actually irritates me sometimes because even locally you hear either sports talk guys or columnists or what have you say, well, the student and student athlete's gone. And I get it. The transfer portal has changed things, and kids are going to 4 or 5 schools, and maybe the transformational part is lost a little in the shuffle, but you're around it every day for years. I've been around it now a lot. The student's still here at Minnesota. I don't know what it's like in other places and what have you, but just to have people just pawn it off. Well, there's no such thing as a student athlete. You walk around here for a week and you'll find out that pretty much is the case. There is a student athlete here.
No doubt about it. Boy, and I see it firsthand, right? When I travel, and you see it too, Mike. You travel with our teams as well. To be on the road and you're at a national championship or a Big Ten championship, and it's a day of competition, and I've had to proctor a test. Yeah. Biology test to someone that in a matter of 5-6 hours is going to be out competing and playing, but they're dialed in on that biology test.
Right.
And I open it up, right, as I give it to them, and it looks like Chinese to me. Just incredibly intelligent young women and young men who are dedicated, not only in the area of athletic competition, but just as much so in their academic pursuits. So ultimately, that's what it's all about. I always say that in what we do, and I felt this strongly as an administrator and certainly a sport administrator, if a student athlete wins a national championship and they don't graduate, it's a failure.
Yeah.
it's an absolute failure. And obviously the goal is to win a national championship or a Big Ten championship and get not only a degree, but a meaningful degree that sets them up when we recruit, and I'm involved in recruiting, right? I meet with parents and athletes. I always say, your 4 or 5 years here at the University of Minnesota will set you up for the next 40 years of your life.
Yeah, no question.
And ultimately, that's what this is all about. Father time is undefeated. Yeah. Athletic skills diminish. We all know that. You and I are great examples of that, right? It's like I say, father time's undefeated, but like I say, that college degree or degrees in many cases, what our student athletes are doing now, that will serve you well for the rest of your life.
Undoubtedly. And as you mentioned, there's folks getting master's degrees now, because when you look at football especially, they sometimes will enroll in January when they're supposed to be in high school, and they have all the summer school, and then they get a redshirt year. And with COVID, some of them got 6 or 7 years. I mean, we look at a guy like Parker Fox on the basketball team who, 8 years, right? So I don't know how many, I think he's got a doctorate maybe.
Yeah.
But you think about that part of it too.
He might like that. Next time I'll see him, I say, hey, Dr. Fox, there you go.
Exactly.
I like it.
Exactly. Let me mention a sponsor here real quick. We're with Marc Ryan, episode 177. We want to thank Affinity Plus. They're your local credit union, proudly serving Minnesota since 1930. They're great Gopher supporters. And if you're a current Gopher student or a proud Gopher alum, that makes you eligible to join this financial. They want to build a meaningful banking relationship and put you first. You can meet with a local employee at any of their branches statewide, including right off campus in Minneapolis. To learn more and find other ways to connect, visit affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. That's affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA, people-centered banking, perfect for Gophers. And in one of the ways that the changing landscape has helped, you drive around town and you see Affinity Plus with these Gopher student athletes on buses and billboards, and they're ambassadors for the brand. And it's all a way of supporting Gopher athletics. You didn't see that 10 years ago, but that's really, when you think about the changing landscape, that's the model that when NIL was invented, that it should be right there.
Right. And again, I love it. I mean, just like any other student, they should be able to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. And that's true NIL right there, right? And when you think of Caitlin Clark at Iowa, true NIL. Yeah. Gable Stevenson, our incredible wrestler here, and the opportunities that he had, the opportunity to win a gold medal, sign a multi-million-dollar contract or $1 million contract with WWE, and then still come back and wrestle for the Gophers. Before NIL and the relaxing of some of those rules, he would not have been able to do that. That's awesome, and I think that's great, not only for a chance to earn some money, but also talk about teaching additional skills, as you work your way through college and into the next stage of your life. So I think that's really, really awesome. As we move forward, everybody's agreeing now that we want guardrails, right? Yeah. We want some governance, a governance structure that's in place. And so now it's really on everybody, I'm talking all the institutions, to really abide by that. And to make sure that structure and governance that's in place really, does have teeth, right? And so I'm excited to see how that all plays out. But like I say, I believe in this. It's going to look different, but I do think it's a positive step. I think it's a positive step for student athletes.
No question.
On many, many levels. And let's face it, a lot of student athletes, depending on the sport they're in, they're not in some of those higher profile sports. Not much is going to change in many regard, and I think people lose sight of that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so let's talk about 36 years here. I joked with you before.
I started when I was 5. Let's
5
get that
years
out
old,
there.
incredible.
Yeah, amazing.
You get to retire when you're just still in your 40s. It's incredible. You're a bit of a unicorn. I called you a unicorn out in the hallway. 36 years. One, there's just not that many administrators that last in one spot. You might bounce around. And I know you had some time at Villanova before you got here, but 36 years to end it, in terms of your career. And it wasn't with just one boss, right? 9 athletic directors you worked with. So over the course of that time, I don't know now in today's landscape if there are going to be many Marc Ryans around anymore. How were you able to navigate through the changing landscape and be valuable enough that whenever there was a new regime and a new hire and a new this, we got to keep Marc Ryan?
Well,
because that doesn't always happen, right, with the entire staff.
Right. No, good question, Mike. And maybe that question might be better served some of the athletic directors that I work for. But, so you're right. So 36-plus years between interim and full-time, 9 athletic directors. Mark Coyle's the 9th director of athletics that I've worked for. PJ is the 8th football coach. Nico Medved, 7th men's basketball coach, and President Cunningham, she is the 7th president of the university.
Wow. So
probably the best way to describe it is the only constant has been change, right?
Change, sure.
So adaptability is important because I think it's important to be adaptable to different leadership and leadership styles, and that's been really, really critical as well. So I also think that it's hard to do anything, right? Especially something that you are passionate about and that you love, if your values don't align with that of your leaders. And I've been really, really fortunate to be surrounded by some incredible leaders, incredible colleagues, coaches, staff, and that's really made it all possible. It's like anything that's really great, anything that's worthwhile, right? You kind of snap your fingers and 36 years goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, right? Because as I've shared with you, this was my dream to work for the Gophers. And my why has always been student athlete centered. My why has always been that life-changing transformational experience. And it's just been really, really incredible on different levels. If I was here 36 years doing the same thing, I never could have done that. And, a wide variety of opportunities and experiences really made it challenging, kept it fresh, and allowed me to contribute in different ways. So I always say I had a lot of opportunities, Mike, to leave, over the course of my 36-plus years, and even be an athletic director at Division 1, 2, 3 schools, and even at the high school level, and other opportunities outside of Gopher athletics that were, meaningful and spiked my interest. But for a lot of reasons, both personal and professional, had a 36-plus year career here at the University of Minnesota.
You see job listings, and oftentimes it lists, here's what your job will be, and it almost always ends in, and other various duties. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy that had more various duties over the course of time than Marc Ryan. I mean, but in a sense, that was, like you just said, it kept it fresh. I mean, every angle that this athletic department has had a piece of somewhere, all the different sports, all the different championships, academics, career guidance. I mean, you've had your finger in just about every single tentacle that's possible here.
Yeah, and it's been absolutely awesome. I like to say that it's very rarely was ever a job.
Yeah.
But it was always a privilege. And that's the way I looked at it. I never took a day of it for granted, Mike. And we had a nice retirement event that the staff put on a couple of weeks ago. And I told them I know the timing is right. We talked about some of those reasons professionally and personally. But it's also not easy necessarily. It was, like I say, it was never a job where Monday came and you couldn't wait till Friday. In fact, there are a lot of Saturdays and Sundays, most Saturdays and Sundays as well. It really, truly was a privilege. And like I said, I never took a day of that for granted. I just consider myself really, really blessed, not only with the work, I mean, and the opportunities here, but, I met my wife here.
Yeah.
And then our 3 kids, children were all born during my time here, and they were raised through Gopher athletics. All three have chosen now to go into the athletics realm professionally in some way, which is, most importantly, you want them to chase their own dreams and have their own vision for what they want their, life to look like from a professional standpoint. And, but, this place, beyond just being an incredible place to work and supported me and my family, it's also, this is where I met my family too. And this is where our family, came to be. So just, I don't know another way to say it, Mike, just really, really blessed and fortunate. Like I say, I've got buddies that were counting the days down to when they were retirement. It was never like that for me. But like I said, I knew the timing was right. And, but it's also difficult too. It's difficult to pull the plug on your dream, right? Even though it's the right thing to do. And the way I look at it now, it's an opportunity for someone else's dream, right?
To fulfill it. You mentioned the family, you and Diane and the group here, but then because of how you poured your heart and soul into the place, your coworkers become kind of that extended family. There are times Spencer Tollickson and I used to joke when we're traveling in basketball, I ate more meals with him in February than my own family sometimes. And so your coworkers and here your colleagues also become like brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews or what have you, right?
It really is true. Probably as much about them and their families as they, as you do about your own. And that's when everybody's invested, right? Not only invested in what you're doing, but invested in each other and have a genuine interest in appreciation and respect for the people that you work with. And that's what makes 36 years possible, right? Without that, it'd be really, really challenging. And so, that's been just another part of just being so blessed.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you about the Clem Haskins era because it's such a complicated kind of time. You were right in the mix there. You wrote a book with Clem, right? Breaking Barriers. I looked it up this morning. You can still get it on Amazon if you want. It was $32.
Wow.
I don't know. It must have been a secondhand book or something. But it's still out there. But it's such a complicated thing to look back on because it's such a high pinnacle of achievement. They make the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and then eventually a Final Four. And then late in that time, we know what happened with the scandal on the academic side with different things going on. And you listen to former players that played for Coach Haskins, and they talk about all these great life lessons they taught, that he taught. You hear Nico talk about, now he's kind of off that coaching tree. That's one of the things I'm glad that time heals some wounds. Some of these guys, John Thomas was honored at a game this year, which was great. And so some of these guys we can start, because I remember when I first got to town in 2006, it was still relatively fresh. I was never told, hey, don't talk about it, but you kind of, it was like, we're not going to mention that much. And you just kind of knew. But I think now as time heals wounds. Anyway, I'm belaboring the question. How do you view that time when you look back on it? Because it was such a high, and then a couple of years later, I'm sure you're, trying to handle in the communications and everything else as an administrator, this crisis, so to speak.
Yeah, it was, as you mentioned, there were some incredible highs in there, throughout all of those years. And when people talk about the barn, right? Certainly you go back, and I remember as a kid when Bill Musselman came in, and that really energized the barn. And they had the pregame spectacle that they had that made it really special. And then Jim Dutcher followed and had some awesome teams and awesome players as well, and championship athletes, and then Clem came in. Those are special times in the barn, right?
Right.
And really, really excited to have Nico on board, and with Nico and Coach Thorson and that entire staff. I like to say, boy, get your tickets for Gopher men's basketball. I think it has a chance to be. I know it's going to be really, really special, because we want the barn to get back to what it was, right? And we need it to get back to what it was, and because it really is special, one of the most special and unique environments in all of college basketball. But you mentioned some names there. You know, I see Schick at games and events all the time, and
of course his son's on the football
Max
team, which is great.
Here, and Max is a wonderful young man. On many levels. So you see Willie Burton, you see guys, from that era. You mentioned some of the names. Nico's a byproduct of that. Dave Thorson, when I met Thor early in my career, we were both at the start of our careers, and he was a GA or restricted earnings coach on Clem's staff. So,
and I know Bobby Jackson just did a Dunkers thing, I think a month, maybe it was in February when the Sixers were in town. So, and that was one of the more popular. I mean, you think of that team, and it still resonates, even though, the records are vacated, so to speak. It happened, right? I mean, people lived it.
Yeah, it was, there was, I'm going to choose to remember some of the incredible moments that we went through together as a program and an athletics department and university, and let history take care of the rest of it. But anyways, there's no question that, the players that came up, and I mentioned Musselman, Dutcher, and then Clem, that era. We talk about transformational experiences, right? Transformational experiences for so many of those guys,
right? No
that came from far and wide, and in many cases still live in this area and in this community and are making an impact. And that's another special thing about recruiting in college athletes, that especially at the University of Minnesota and the opportunities here in the Twin Cities after you graduate.
It is amazing.
So many of our student athletes come and before they're recruited really either didn't know much about Minnesota at all, or maybe anything at all about it, and they choose to stay here and live here and raise a family here and build a career here. And I think that's really, really special.
Let's go down memory lane here a little bit with some of your favorite memories. I know the 97. Is there a time in that 97 team or a game that you remember specifically, maybe during the NCAA tournament? Is there what stands out to you most there on that one? Because that's the one in basketball terms that is really kind of the standard people are trying to get to here.
Right. Well, obviously it was an incredibly talented team and up and down the lineup. I may not have it exactly right, Mike, but I think there were 3 first-round NBA picks on that team. Quincy Lewis, who ended up being Big Ten Player of the Year, was coming off the bench. He was like a 7th or 8th man on that team, but Bobby Jackson just was an incredible player, one of the greatest players, one of the greatest athletes during my time here. As far as what he contributed beyond just points on many levels. But one of the greatest games in my times here it was the Sweet 16 game against Clemson and San Antonio in double overtime, and Bobby was just magnificent. I think half of the Twin Cities was in San Antonio, and so that was a really, really special game, and one that I will never forget. When you go back even a few years from that 1990 team, again, different era of college athletics where, Clem brought in that young group, Willie Burton, Jim Shikonjansky, Melvin Newbern. Kevin Lynch was a year younger than those guys.
Was Coffey in that group
Richard
too?
Coffey, Mario Green coming off the bench, and on and on and on. They lost a lot their first 2 years, got beat up a lot, and then the third year in 1989 they made the Sweet 16 and had a special run and lost to Duke. And then in 1990, again, talent up and down that lineup. But again, Willie Burton, when you think of Bobby Jackson, I think of Willie Burton too is one of the greatest players that I've ever witnessed. And
just a great guy too.
Great guy, and ended up being a first-round NBA pick, but he just kind of willed us to victory in a lot of those games. And I'll never forget being in New Orleans in the Superdome, and it's my second year here at Minnesota, and we're playing Syracuse, right? And Jim Boeheim, they had 3 first-round picks.
Derek Coleman,
who ended up being a number 1 pick overall in the draft, and Billy Owens, I think was 3 in the draft. And they had a big guy named LaRon Ellis. 3 first-round draft picks. They were prohibitive favorites in the Superdome against Minnesota, and our guys were phenomenal, and we pulled off a huge upset. Guy came off the bench, a guy named Bob Martin from Apple Valley. I think Schick maybe got in a little bit of foul trouble, if I'm not mistaken, and Bob came up, played certainly one of the best games of his career, and we upset Syracuse. And then in the regional final, we played Georgia Tech for the right to go to the Final Four, and Bobby Cremens was the head coach, and they had 3 guys they called Lethal Weapon 3. It was Kenny Anderson, Dennis Scott, and Brian Oliver. And the score was 93-91, went right down to the last possession. Great game. Georgia Tech went to the Final Four. We gave an incredible effort, and we're just one bucket away from making it. If I remember right, Mike, you'd have to look up the stat, but it was 93-91. I remember these kind of things, right? Yeah. The old SID.
Can't remember what we ate for breakfast yesterday, but we can remember that, yes.
And I think Lethal Weapon 3, I think those 3 guys scored all but 2 of Georgia Tech's points. But just absolutely electric for a young guy, to be there and to experience that and be a part of that. So those are special moments.
Football-wise, the 1999, and you were involved in football a lot, right? For a number of years when Mace was here, you were in charge of travel and hotel and all that stuff, which is a job in and of itself. In 99, Penn State ranked 2nd in the country, right? And the Gophers go out there. Tell me about that. What do you remember about that?
Yeah, well, you're right. I was, Gopher football. I go back a long ways with Gopher football. Actually, going back to my third oldest brother, Bob. Was a scholarship football player here in the 1970s. So I went to Gopher football games at the old Memorial Stadium as a kid when my brother was on the team. I remember when it was different rules back then, but I remember Butch Nash came to our house, legendary coach Butch Nash. In our house in Rosemount, and he brought the NLI with him, and Bob signed it, in our living room. Yeah. And so I go back a long, long ways with Gopher football. And then when you talk about Coach Mason, when he first got hired, I was the director of communications, director of media relations, we called it at the time. Working with football, and then I transitioned into becoming, in administration. I transitioned to later in Mace's career here to become the sport administrator for football, and just seen so many great teams in so many highlights. But I think if there's one game that stands out among many in my career here. It was against Penn State. When I say that, most people would probably think the Penn State game here in 2019, which is also an incredible game.
Amazing, yes. Which in my time, because I post-dated 99 here, that's probably my favorite game.
Yeah.
But I wasn't here in 99.
Yeah.
In fact, after you tell the story, I'll tell the story about that game.
Yeah, so, one of the all-time great calls, Mike, and I don't know if it just came out when you said this place has gone nuclear.
It just bubbled up.
That's a great clip, just a great soundbite. And usually the best ones are ones that just come to you. Ironically, I was not at that game. I was watching that game.
The game.
The 2019 game, and I made a dad decision, right? So our son, Sean, playing at St. John's at the time, where he coaches now, they had their season open tournament up in Duluth. And, he was going to make his first career start.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
you gotta go watch that.
I had to be there, but we watched it at Grandma's in Duluth.
Yeah.
We had all the St. John's parents and families. We watched the game.
Oh, man.
And cheered in Grandma's.
Well, that had to be as fun as if you were there.
It was really cool. And then we went and watched the Johnnies play. But so ironically, that was an incredibly memorable game and win. But I wasn't there for that one. But the one that really stands out to me that I think really changed the momentum of Gopher football under Glenn Mason's leadership was 1999 at Penn State. We went into Penn State. They were number 2 in the country, undefeated, at the height of Joe Paterno, right? Beautiful early November day. They were loaded. They had the 2 players that would be number 1 and 2 in the draft just a few months later.
LeVar Arrington,
number 1.
And I forget who the other one.
Courtney Brown, number 2.
That's right.
Yeah. And those guys, they were loaded, and we went in there and upset them, and Dan Nystrom, true freshman kicker at the time, and he booted it through 24-23 on the last play of the game. I still have Sports Illustrated, they had a picture in there of Dan just as he kicked it and the line holding back. You can see Arrington and Brown because they had blocked a number of kicks too that year. And as it was going through, or as it was the kick was as Dan was kicking it, and like I say, I still have that in our home down in our family room. And just I thought that really changed the course of Gopher football. We went on. Coach Mason was the National Coach of the Year and Big Ten Coach of the Year. Tyrone Carter, another one of the greatest athletes in my time here, was the heart and soul of that team. I think that defense had 6 guys that played in the NFL, including Tyrone, who played for the Vikings, and the Steelers, was in the Super Bowl with the Steelers. And we hadn't been to a bowl game in 13 years. Now we're used to going to bowl games, right? And I thought that really changed the course of Gopher football. And to a certain extent, we're still kind of riding that here. We're still waiting for that championship season, right? That next step hasn't come yet, but under the leadership of so many other great coaches that have also followed Coach Mason and certainly PJ and his staff have done an awesome job here. We've become accustomed to that level of success, and we're all waiting for that championship season here, right, to happen. Sure. But that 99 game was special.
So I was, at the time, I was working in radio at Iowa. I grew up in Iowa, so I was spotting. I was a spotter. You spotted for Dave Lee, right? I was a spotter for the Iowa radio guy, who's still one of my best friends. And then I hosted a post-game show.
Ed Podolak?
Ed Podolak and Gary Dolphin was
Gary,
the group. I think I've been between growing up in Iowa and then now having been here. This is, Mark, going to be my 20th season starting this fall, which I don't know where time goes, right? I mean, at some point it shifts from you're the new guy to you're an old man. And it doesn't, the fine line in the middle, it went pretty quick from you're the new guy, who the heck is this guy, to, man, you've been around a long freaking time. But I'm in Iowa at the time. And I think between my time there and my time here growing up there, I was thinking about this for some other reason a week or two ago. I think I've only missed one Iowa-Minnesota game. Now I'm talking the matchup between those two teams. One since 1980.
Wow.
So I was 9 years old in 1980. I think I've been to every one. I was sick. My family, we lived in St. Louis right before we came up here. We got here, and I was planning to go to the game. I always would because my wife's family's from here, so we would always either come up, watch the Iowa game. I won't tell you which side before I got here. The 6 I'm rooting for, right?
We converted you, right?
We got total conversion, 100% conversion. But I ended up getting sick. I got some food poisoning, so that's the only game I've missed. I was in the state ready, and I was at my in-laws' house, but I just couldn't, and believe me, to keep me from that game, the sickness, and I don't get sick much, so it was some food poisoning. Anyway, that's the only game I think I've missed in all that time. But that 99 game, I'm doing the post-game show.
Iowa's playing somebody. I'm in the Kinnick Stadium press box. We talked about Phil Hattie. I'm sure he was your counterpart at Iowa. I'm sure he was in the press box at the time.
Sure.
But I'll never forget, we're in watching the game next door to our broadcast booth, the Minnesota-Penn State game. And at the time, the athletic director at Iowa was Bob Bowlesby. And he was, first of all, of course, there's a rivalry there. So Minnesota doesn't like Iowa. Iowa doesn't like Minnesota. So I don't think he probably wanted Minnesota to particularly win because, as you said, they knew that could be a momentum-changing situation. But even bigger was Penn State's going to go to the playoff, and the Big Ten's going to get a chunk of dough. And he's just shaking his head. He goes, they just cost us money. They just cost us money. And so I remember that story from all those years ago, being down there, and he was just shaking his head like, oh, boy, because I don't remember who ended up winning that. Was that Nebraska that year? I don't remember whoever won it, but it was not Penn State. That pretty much knocked them out of, because at that time it was 2 teams. It wasn't a 4-team playoff. It was 2 that got in. Yeah. And so he was just like, that cost us money.
Yeah, well, you talk about a small world. So Bob Bowlesby, awesome guy, right? And so we're same alma mater. He's a Moorhead State guy.
Right?
Yeah. So he was a great wrestler up there and part of All-American and part of national championship team or teams up there. But yeah, so, and then that season, a couple of weeks later, we played the season finale at Iowa.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, Kirk Ferentz had just gotten there.
Yes.
And they were not very they did not have a good record at that time. But I remember that game went down to a goal line stand.
Yeah.
Iowa had it down.
100%.
Right?
Was it Hoffman, I think, right?
Sean Hoffman, knocked down a pass.
On 4th down,
Yeah. And that preserved, at that time you only played 11 games, so at that time preserved an 8-3 season, and then we end up going to the Sun Bowl and playing Oregon. But that was a real special turnaround season for Gopher football. Like I said, it was 13 years from the last bowl game, but it was all really what really allowed us to take the next level was that win at Penn State. That really, people around the country took notice then. You could not help but take notice of not only beating the number 2 and undefeated team in the country, but in their own backyard.
And then I remember the next year, Ray Christensen talked about this, the great Ray Christensen, that he had called a win in every Big Ten venue but Ohio State. And it was his last year. Dave was going to take over the next year. And in his last year, Ray Christensen got to call a win at the Horseshoe, which was incredible.
Yeah, that was not only was that a win, that was a pretty convincing win in that particular game. So that was another special one to be a part of, right? Because Minnesota was not unlike most schools. You didn't go into the Horseshoe and win there very often. So just some great memories, Mike, through the years. And you mentioned Ray,
Oh, man.
I grew up as a kid, it was before the TV era that we have now. The Gophers were rarely on TV. There was usually only one college football game a weekend.
On TV,
Nobody was on, And, let's face it, our eyes and ears were Ray Christensen. That's how we experienced the Gophers was through Ray. And, such a, not only incredible broadcaster, but just an incredible human being too. So
he
just
was
a treasure to know him.
That's one of my the greatest joys of here was the chance to get to know him when I knew him. I interned at CCO Radio back in '93 and got to know him a little bit then. And then I came back, all those years later in 2006, and he was doing vignettes on our pregame show. That was back when Dave, and Daryl were doing the play-by-play. I was doing the pregame show, so I would drive to Ray's condo or his where he lived in Rosemont, and we would record those in his living room. I'm still amazed, as a guy myself who has to record commercials and do things, and it's 6 takes in, I finally get it right. I'm not kidding. So we probably did that for 3 years. I'd drive over and we'd record all the Washburn-McCreevy spots, right? So he had a specific one for each game. So it'd be early August. I'd have my recorder and he'd sit, just in his on his couch, and he'd have the scripts, and he had the old 60-minute style stopwatch, not a digital, but the clicker.
Oh, yeah.
And so he knew they had to be 30 seconds. And So think about that: 13 commercials for football, and then we would go also do basketball. He wouldn't do. We would rotate through maybe 10 in basketball, but
Right.
I'm talking 20 commercials at least a year. So let's say he did 70 or 100 of these spots. He flubbed maybe one or two. Like, it was perfect, and he'd hit that stopwatch, and you could tell he'd look, and he'd have the script. He would just even at that point he was getting a little frail, and he'd have that script on his knees, and he'd be looking, and he'd slow or speed it up to hit the time.
Yeah.
Which is so old school, because now you just read it and you got digital recording. If you're 32 seconds, you just squeeze it to 29 and send it off. Easy. But back, when Ray was coming up, you had old real tape. You couldn't do much. And so he'd be like, Washburn, McCreevy, funeral chapels. And then you could tell as he's looking, he'd speed it up to get, because you wanted 29 or 30.
Yeah.
Or he'd slow it down a little bit at the end. And he didn't flub any. Like I'm saying, out of 100, maybe 2 over the years, and he was mad at himself the 2 or 3 times he did it. He'd like and then he'd do it. But what a sweetheart of a guy!
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, we talk about
great.
My time here. That's just an honor, and what a great treasure he was, not only for Gopher Athletics and University of Minnesota, but the entire state of Minnesota.
Yeah, that's back when you could listen to the Gophers and you knew what was going on the radio. Now the guy, you listen and you don't know what's going on. I don't know who it is, but whoever's doing those games on the radio.
I know him. I'll talk to him, okay? I'll
give
get
him
back
some
to you.
pointers, will you? Yeah, no doubt. The 01-02 season, in your time, you think that's the best single season over the broad spectrum of Gopher athletics?
Yeah, boy, we've had some great years. But 01-02 was really, really special. When you think about in that academic year, we won 3 NCAA team titles. Men's hockey in dramatic fashion, overtime over Maine at the XLNG Center. Wrestling, if I'm not mistaken, 02 was a back-to-back, because I think they won in 01 as well for wrestling. And then men's golf in kind of storybook, very much storybook fashion, won the NCAA. They won the Big Ten championship for the first time in I don't know how many years, and then came back and won the NCAA championship when the sport was, facing potential elimination here at the University of Minnesota. And the neat thing about that is our current head coach of our program, Justin Smith, was not only a member of that team, but a key factor in both those championships. So, and then on top of that, the 3 NCAA titles, we had 7 conference championships in that one academic year. And then the Director's Cup, which is national finishes across all your sports and how you compare yourself to the other schools around the country. We finished 7th on the strength of those 3 NCAA titles. We finished 7th in the finals Director's Cup standings, which to this day still is our best ever. So we were having a changeover. We were going to a merged department, and so there's some new staff coming in. Joe Maturi was becoming our athletic director, still a great friend and a great mentor to this day. Joe Maturi, like Mark Dienhart, I had breakfast this morning with Mark Dienhart, former director of men's athletics here, another great friend, mentor, someone like Joel that I also look up to so much. Well, there was some new staff that came in with Joel, and I remember sitting in a meeting that summer in a conference room, 285 conference room, and I said, "You guys, you have to realize this is not how it always is. This is an incredibly special moment in the history of Gopher athletics, and it just these championships just don't fall off a tree, and it's not easy, right? And so." We've had so many great years and so many great championships, but that year stands out as something that was incredibly special.
You were telling me the story about, because you were in charge of some of this stuff at the time. You were in charge of championships and directing different things. So that Frozen Four, Maine, Minnesota at the X, you're down underneath. Maine is up late. Tell that story.
Yeah, probably about a 10-year period, Mike, where you talk about keeping it fresh and keeping it interesting, right? Where I stepped into a role where I was the championship director for all the NCAA, Big Ten, and WCHA championship events that we hosted. And some of those were, took a lot less time. And when you start talking about a NCAA Frozen Four at the X, or an NCAA men's basketball regional at the Metrodome, those are like a 1.5 to 2 year prep and large volunteer base and so on and so forth to pull those off. And the first championship that I did was the Frozen Four in 2002, and incredibly memorable at the Xcel Energy Center. The Gophers were in it. Just an incredible weekend. Jordan Leopold won the Hobie Baker Award. They have the semifinals on Thursday and the championship on Saturday. The Friday is the awards in between day. The off day is the awards, and Jordan won the Hobie Baker Award. And then that Saturday night we played Maine for the national championship. And, even though inside you're dying for the maroon and gold, you've got to be unbiased in the championship role, right? And as the director in the championship,
just in general,
working with the NCAA staff and the NCAA hockey committee. And so game is winding down. We're down by a goal. And if I'm not mistaken, we pulled the goalie. And we are in a conference room down on ice level.
But in the bowels, right?
Down on ice level, right by the two tunnels where each bench, the main bench and the Minnesota bench. And in a championship situation, as we've all seen with championships, when a championship is won, all of a sudden they're wearing championship hats and T-shirts. And, you just don't make those right away.
Yeah, you got to be prepped for it.
You got to be prepped. You've got one set for each team, and so our staff, along with the NC staff, we're getting ready. Honestly, getting ready with the hats and the tees for Maine.
Bringing out the Maine boxes.
Because it's getting down to the wire here, and we're getting prepared for that. And we're in this conference room with, like I said, I'm in there with the NCAA committee and staff, and we got our volunteers getting ready to hand out the hats and T-shirts. And we got a little TV in the room. And there's probably about a 10-second delay between what we're seeing on the TV to what's happening on the ice. And in the bowels of the arena at ice level, I hear this incredible roar that just shakes the building. And I'm like, okay, I think something really good happened. And so we watch the TV, and then Matt Kowalska ties the game with less than a minute to go. And it's the loudest roar I've heard at any point in time at any sporting event that I've been at.
And you're in the bowels.
And I'm in the bowels. Yeah. It shook the arena. And I remember after we scored, I pumped my fist and went, yes! And then I looked at the NCAA staff and committee, look at me, and I go, I'm sorry, guys. And they laugh. They go, it's okay, Mark. We understand. And then so we put everything back, and we, the boxes, and okay, who, because we're going to overtime, right? And in overtime, we're watching it in the tunnels that lead to the benches, and that's when able to witness firsthand, see Grant Patoli score the winning goal, and the place just went berserk. As berserk as the place went when we won it, I still think the tying goal might have been just a titch louder.
Is that right? Wow.
But just talk about a perfect weekend. There were record crowds, Frozen Four record crowds, record TV ratings. It was just an incredibly special weekend to celebrate college hockey. But it was the Gophers' first national championship in 23 years. We came back the next year in Buffalo in 2003 and went back-to-back. But that weekend in 2002, I'll never forget that in the role that I had as the championship director. And you could not have scripted it better for college hockey and certainly for Gopher hockey fans.
What a story. That's awesome. You have the main hat starting to sit out on the on the table, and the next thing you know, yes, and away you go. Lindsay Whalen and company, their Final Four season, Minnesota hosted those first couple of rounds, which you had a role in as well. What was that? What were those few days like?
Yes, so I was the championship director for that as well. And so if you remember, Lindsay broke her hand during the Big Ten season. She was 5 weeks out from when the tournament started, 5 weeks out from when our first game was, where she had broke her hand. And nobody knew if she was going to be able to come back to play, if she was able to play, would it be like, she did not play a game since when she hurt the last, I don't know how many regular season games. And we struggled as a result. And so our record and our seeding were impacted. We had done enough to get into the tournament, but then we were also hosting. It was a different championship structure at that time. So we were hosting at Williams Arena. Even though we were not the high seed, Kansas State came in as the high seed. Yeah. And Kansas State was loaded. They had a great team. They had Nicole Oldie was one of their stars, ended up playing for the Lynx. And so I'll never forget, you have open practice day, Mike, which I think fans out there probably recognize that, that's an open opportunity when you talk about Final Fours, in this case, NCAA tournaments and whatnot, where fans can, come and watch practice and get a chance to kind of get up close and personal with some of the athletes. That was the first time anybody had seen, is the day before the first game. We're playing UCLA in the first round. The day before the first game, Lindsay comes out with a wrap on her hand. It was like a brace. And the number of TV stations there, and I'll never forget getting the layup line, like the first basic layups. Yeah. And everybody just wanted to see her first layup. And then you just got like a sigh of relief, But there were a ton of people there. There was media there, and everybody. And so the next day she came out in her first game, like in 5-6 weeks, however long it was that she was out. And she not only played, but she played magnificently. Yeah. That didn't come out very well. She played marvelous.
Yeah,
she was awesome. Yeah. She had 31 points and lit it up. And 2 days later, we played Kansas State, who wasn't necessarily happy to be a higher seed and playing us in front of just incredible crowds. They were record.
Were they sold out or close?
It was very close. Yeah. There were record crowds for women's regional at that point in time. And we really, frankly, blew out Kansas State. Yeah. And then that team obviously, just got on a roll right to the Final Four in New Orleans. So, Lindsay Whalen, you talk about just another one of those athletes in my time here. Just just a game changer. Someone that could impact the game in so many ways, and really in many ways, you talk about what Caitlin Clark has done for women's basketball, not only nationally but internationally, and the impact she's had on. I would equate Lindsay Whalen in Minnesota for women's basketball, in a similar fashion. She really put Gopher women's basketball on the map.
I think if NIL was going on then.
Oh, it'd be off the charts. It'd be off the charts. She's from Hutchinson and local kid that went to the University of Minnesota, and just, as humble as they come, and just, an incredible player, incredible person, and certainly one of the greatest in my time that I've ever witnessed here in my 36 years here at Minnesota.
I think generally in sports, and you grew up, you mentioned Vikings season tickets and Gophers and all this, she's in the running for Mount Rushmore. If you're going to take the 4 greatest Minnesota athletes, in terms of her accomplishments and what she's done, Olympic gold, WNBA winningest player at the time of her retirement, Frozen Four, Final Four here, Hall of Fame. I mean, she's in that discussion, and you're talking about people like Fran Tarkenton, Kevin Garnett, Kirby Puckett. She's in that mix.
Without question.
Right?
Without question. It was, that was just a really special time to be in that arena and see, I remember the NCAA rep that was here just could not believe it. I forget how many game programs they sent us. They sent us game programs equivalent to what they were sending to the other first round NCAA sites that were hosting the women's championship that year. And we were out of programs before the first game even started on the first round day. We were out of programs to the point we had to run off. I just ran off on a copy machine rosters that we can hand out
to people
for the second night when we played Kansas State. It was just game changer on many levels.
Yeah. We have so many things to talk about. We probably won't hit them all. This also, when you're talking 36 years of your personal, and what's beauty is it's at firsthand accounts. You got some inside stories. You're traveling with these teams and stuff. So I think we'll set a record for longest Go Gopher podcast here as well, because I want to still hit on a few more things. TCF Bank Stadium, Joel Maturi, Phil Eston, who's now at St. Thomas, and you really, right? Maybe a few others in there, but really, I know Coach Mason was part of that, spearheaded that. What was that like? The process to get it all approved, and then that night when Air Force was in town and to get a win and to see all the gold and outdoor football on campus again.
Yeah, and I appreciate you probably gave me too much credit. You named all the right names as far as really making it happen. I'm not sure that I'm in that category. In fact, I know I'm not. But, when you look at it, I mentioned having breakfast with Mark Dienhart this morning. And Mark was the first AD to really talk about it and the importance of it, along with Glenn Mason, when probably it wasn't. We were still playing in the Metrodome, and it was challenging for him to talk about the need to go get back to campus. Probably challenging for him from a competitive standpoint, but he knew it was the right thing. And so I give Mark and Mace a ton of credit for getting that ball rolling, right? And then Tom Moe came in as an interim director, and then our permanent director for a period of time, another Gopher alum, great Gopher family, right? The Moes.
And the Coughlin's kind of tied into that.
And the Coughlin's,
right?
I mean, just, talk about one of the all-time great Gopher families, and kept that momentum going. And then we on Joe Maturi's watch as our AD is when we really sealed the deal. And Phil Eston was a big part. Phil could probably still tell you how many M's are in that stadium and how many toilets are in that stadium, because every detail, of course, Phil is now the athletic director at St. Thomas and doing a great job there. But I was the sport administrator at that time, so I got to, be involved in many aspects of the rollout, and certainly the pregame festivities for that first game. And certainly a big part of it is I did the non-conference football scheduling. And so it was really, really important and impactful for us because we were coming back to campus, and used to be Memorial Stadium, which was named in honor of our veterans, obviously. We were really hopeful to get one of the service academies as our first opponent. And it took a lot of moving around. It took probably a year or two of work to making it happen, but it was really, really impactful on many levels to have Air Force here as our first opponent. And then that night, I'll never forget it. It was special. Those of us that go to games here, this was 2009, right? Yeah. You don't think about it much anymore, but I try to remember, even as I'm walking by it or driving by it, going to games, that I always pinch myself, remember, holy smokes, it wasn't always like this.
It was a parking lot.
We had my first 20 years here. We were in the Metrodome at the time, and I mentioned to you going to watch my brother when he was on the team at Memorial Stadium when Tony Dungy was playing quarterback. And so I've seen Gopher games in 3 different stadiums. And that first night, it was just so incredibly special. It was very emotional, I think, for a lot of us, certainly Gopher football alums, to see that come to fruition. And then we capped it off with a win over a very good Air Force team. So that's a night that I won't soon forget. Mike, amazing. Really, really special.
Even like from my standpoint, I was relatively new, but I was excited, obviously, about it. And Dave Lee, Dave Mona, Daryl Thompson are doing the games. I'm sitting up behind them as the scoreboard guy, right? What Tanner Hoops now does for us, and Corbu did when the shift was made. But Ray Christensen called some of that third quarter. We brought him back, and to see how he worked and operated, he had this little card in front of him. I'm like, I can't read what he wrote on there. It was so small, and it was like time stood still. Like we were throwing back to the old days. It was he was right on Eric Decker and all this stuff, and he knew who was making the tackle. And oh man, so the whole night was amazing. Yeah,
that was an incredibly classy move that Ray was able to do. It was a big part of what made, among many other things, that made that day and that evening so special, and really classy move also on Dave Lee's part.
100%,
that's, as we both know, that's the kind of guy that Dave Lee is.
Yeah.
Yep. And so just another notch that that just showed how special and memorable that night really was.
Yeah, for sure. And I had joked earlier that Spencer and I have joked that we have eaten more dinners and lunches because you travel. You were traveling with the team, so you and Dave, you're like tight friends, right? I mean, still.
Yeah. Well, we're neighbors too.
Yeah,
so,
and you live next to each other. That helps
so the good
too,
neighbor, the good neighbor.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing.
so just. Great friend, awesome person, and obviously a incredible career that he had on many levels as well. So, really proud to call Dave a friend.
You and I got to travel together to the College Softball World Series in 2019, that Amber Pfizer-led group, just a star pitcher. And speaking of NIL, which that's much more recent than, say, Lindsay even, in 2019, not that long ago, that Amber Pfizer would have been able to cash in because that team kind of captured the imagination of the state as well. But that was a fun trip down there, and the regionals here were fantastic. I mean, man, that was fun.
Yeah, I've been the sport administrator for softball for a number of years and love that sport and love working with the student athletes, incredible student athletes we've had there. I always like to say that 2019 run, which was incredible, the genesis of that really was in 2017. Yep. Jess Allister was our coach. Sarah Groenewagen was our pitcher who ended up pitching and earning a bronze medal in the Olympics with Canada. Yeah. G, we called her, Sarah Groenewagen, G.
And she interned in this office too, right?
Yeah. G's one of the best. She was virtually unhittable. She was as good as I've ever seen, and Pfizer was phenomenal as well. But the 2017 team was finished the regular season Big Ten champs, Big Ten tournament champs, number one team in the country. We were 54-3.
It's amazing.
And the NCAA committee did not give us even a top 16 seed.
Sent us to Alabama.
Really ended up being a duel between G and Alabama's pitcher who ended up pitching the Olympics for Mexico. Two of the best pitchers in the country. It was a 1-0 game. We came back and played them later in the tournament, similar type of game. I do think in 2019 that set the table for 2019.
100%.
2019 got what they deserved and what they had earned. And I thought that, the 2017, what I would call fiasco, or however you want to look at it, where we were not given the opportunity to host, it really, they made it right in 2019. And so we got to play those teams in our own backyard, which is all you got to do is look at, especially in the sport of softball or baseball, teams that host regionals and super regionals by and large are the ones that advance, right? And so we got to play Georgia, among other teams in the region, our own backyard in advance.
LSU too, right?
And then the super regional best 2 of 3 was us and LSU, and we got to play them up here in our backyard. And that was just an incredible run by an incredible Jamie Traxel was our head coach and did an absolutely phenomenal job. You look at that lineup up and down, and Amber Pfizer. I still stay in contact with her. She's now the pitching coach at North Florida. They made the NCAA tournament this year. Really proud of her and for all her success. I think of, just so many great players. Maddie Houlihan was a part of that team, Natalie Den Hartog, Carly Brandt,
that Carly Brandt's office is about 15 feet from where we're recording this.
Right. McKenna Partain, on and on. I know I'm missing names. They're just they're all were so much a part of that. That was really another highlight of my career here, was to see us go to OKC and play there. I think Amber pitched every inning of both the regional and super regional. It just was dominant in so many ways.
That was what I also remember, and this is what you even talk to athletes and different people, and I know when we've even told stories, you remember the games, but then there's other stuff about all these trips. Do you remember when we flew into Oklahoma City, we had to literally fly around a tornado? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember we were delayed getting out of here, and then
because you were in charge of the whole travel.
Right. Yeah, delayed getting out of here, and then issues down there, as you know, in what can happen in Minnesota too, but especially down there. I mean, a tornado and weather can pop up like, kind of instantaneously.
Remember, we just did this big loop on the Sun Country flight and land, and as we all are landing and turning our cell phones on, everyone's getting these weather alerts. Remember on the phone, all up and down the aisle. Like, I think we just flew out of a tornado. And as it turned out, we avoided it. We circled to miss it, which is incredible.
Another story. On the trail, so to speak. But that, you talk about, that era, Coach Allister, Coach Traxel following her, and now Coach Ritter. It's, Gopher softball is a big deal, in the state of Minnesota. It's one of the toughest tickets. I'll never forget, we were playing Northwestern, and it was the last regular season weekend of the series. And it's for the Big Ten championship, right? And I walked out of my office. We were still in the Bierman building at the time. And it was about 15 minutes before first pitch. And on 5th Street, the bridge there were 2 people up on the bridge talking to 2 people down on street level, which is where I was at. And they said, we're going to go watch the game at a sports bar. We can't get in. And the people on the street said, well, how much? She said, well, we were talking to scalpers. They were $200 each for Gopher softball. Yeah. And that's not every game. Don't get me wrong there. But, it's become it's nothing sells tickets like the scarcity of tickets. Yeah. And it's a tough ticket when we got big weekend series at Jane Sage to get in there. And it's amazing to see the growth of softball and, again, the World Series again this year and record TV ratings and attendance. It's just it's pretty special to see that.
Over your course of time, I want to ask you about this too here. Kevin Dare in 2001. Talk about that story and what kind of a challenge that was for everybody when that was going on.
Yeah, you talk about the highs and lows. I'm not sure I'd even classify this as a low, but it was one of those tragedies, right? So I'm the championship director in that role that we talked about previously, and we're hosting the Big Ten men's indoor track and field championship. At that time, the indoors, they had a separate women's and men's championship. Now it's all combined. But so we're hosting the men's championship, and it's day 1 of 2 days. It's Friday and Saturday. And Kevin Dare was a junior champion pole vaulter and
from Penn State,
Penn State, right? And it's early on that first day, and I'm over at kind of the head table at the end of the track, and Ed Nuttycombe, who's the head coach at Wisconsin, somebody I respect, former head coach, retired, incredible career. He's about as even keel as you'll get, and a ton of respect for him. And he's running across the track over towards me, towards the head table. Call 911, call 911. I had no idea at the time what Ed was talking about, but I knew enough about Ed and respected him enough that if he was I didn't ask any questions. Yeah. I just called 911 and dialed it up. And as I was doing that, I was asking him, where's the issue? And we actually had emergency service right there as well, right off of the track. And so Kevin was vaulting, and he went up, a little bit disoriented, we think, and then landed in the pole vault box, which is a hard structure, I think, head first. Ugh. And so, then we go into emergency mode, right? And then Kevin passed away. And then the initial thing as the championship director is trying to find a room so that they could gather all the Penn State team, and they could be told first that their teammate that they had breakfast with that morning was no longer with us. And the meet continued for that day, right? And then Jim Delaney, the great longtime commissioner, former commissioner of the Big Ten Conference, flew in. And so Sunday morning, actually it was Saturday, Sunday morning was day 2 and all the finals, right? And we had a meeting in the field house with the coaches and Jim Delaney, and he made the right decision that the meet should not continue. The Penn State coaches had relayed that the Dare family would like to see the meet continue, and but Jim Delaney made the decision as the commissioner. Kind of what would you expect them to say? Their competitors, right. They don't want the competition to stop, but Jim made the right decision. It is my understanding that still to this day, it is the only time a Big Ten athlete has ever passed away during a Big Ten competition. So then I've got a little bit less than 2 hours to plan a memorial service in the field house and line up a chaplain and others that are going to speak and how we're going to honor Kevin Dare. And so just an incredibly emotional time. The leadership, Penn State leadership at the time, and the Dare family got behind, and I believe still are behind, how can you improve the event from a safety standpoint? And they've did some amazing things initially and continue to this day to try to improve the event from a safety standpoint. But boy, that was just devastating.
Yeah, man, and you're in charge of that. And then, not to bring it down, but this is all part of a 36-year career. One that probably even hit closer to home was your oversee the football program, and we all know the Brandon Hall story. But you were, you kind of had to take, you and Coach Mace and others had to take leadership of that as well, which was, times of tragedy is when leaders have to lead.
Yeah, so we had played the season opening game at the Metrodome, had beat Southwest Texas State. And then hours later, Brandon actually is at home at his place in bed, and then got a call that some of his teammates were having some issues downtown. So he got out of bed, went down there, and there was some type of argument, altercation, that from what we understood, Brandon, really, really nice young man, was trying to be peacemaker, and he got caught up in some gunfire and was shot and, passed away. And so just an incredible tragedy again, like Kevin, with Brandon, to lose a young life in such a tragic way. So we ended up having a memorial service and planned a memorial service at Williams Arena for later that week. And again, just scholarship in Brandon's name and so on and so forth, and honored him at our next game. So those are the things, it keeps it all in perspective, right? We all want to win and lose in the field of play, so to speak, but those things that really put everything into perspective, and that's within a matter of just a little bit over a year, that both those events happened. So yeah,
I know when we were all at Bill McCreevy's service, Joel spoke, because they're very good friends, and Joel talked about that event that Bill jumped in to help with some of the planning. Mace was on it, you were on it, Joel was on it. I can't imagine some of that and we saw it with Gary Tinsley a few years later when he was a student athlete here when Coach Brewster was here and passed away as well, and the team all flew down to Florida, I think, right, for the memorial service there. So sometimes in the course of this great journey comes some hardship too.
No, you're right. And the Creevies really did step up for that service we had at Williams Arena. It was just, obviously Bill, and he was a great guy,
yeah, great Gopher,
great Gopher and great family, and at times like that, that's what you need, everybody to step up and pitch in and be supportive of each other, right, and be there for each other. And boy, as we talk about those two, you talk about Gary too, and that's another. Another one during my time here, just a tragic situation. And Gary was a special young guy, and it wasn't always easy for him coming in, and ended up having a really nice football career for us, and graduated, and life was really taken off for him. And again, just another person who was taken away from us way too soon.
Yeah.
So.
No question. All right, one quick commercial, and then I've still got a few more questions.
Okay.
We are set. Do you have to go anywhere? You're retired. You have nowhere to go.
I'm good, Mike. Thank you.
Summer is here, and that means it's time to get on the boat and on the water. You can let OnX Fish help you find the next best bite. The Fish app helps offer the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your success. You can use that Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake by lake regulations, and private and public land ownership info. Download the OnX Fish app on the App Store or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information about the app that is changing the game on water. You've referenced, Mark, a couple of times that it was your dream to be working at the University of Minnesota, and what struck me is when we were chatting, to be the sports information director. Now, you and I we're similar. We remember all these numbers and all these things, and we've got good memories, and we're sports fans, and we grew up kind of sports geeks and junkies. I grew up wanting to be a sports broadcaster, so I'm also living that dream out. But growing up, I didn't know what an SID was, a sports information guy. Now, as you mentioned, they call it sports communications. How did that piece of it come into being, that I want to be the sports information director for the Golden Gophers?
Yeah, great question, and kudos to you too, because you lived your dreams,
right?
Yeah. Pretty special. But anyway, so I wrote. It was senior in high school. We had to write our autobiography, right? Rosemont High School.
Yeah.
Okay, and you had to tell about your family and your life and then what you were going to do. And it was a great exercise, right? An assignment, because I'm a senior in high school. I'm playing sports, hanging out with my buddies. I got a girlfriend. Life was pretty. I'm coming home, and mom's got dinner, and laundry's done, and you got me to think. What am I going to do? This is not how life is always going to be. And so wrote that paper, started at first hour and finished at seventh hour. But in that, I said my dream is to be the sports information director at the University of Minnesota. And so everything you do from then is to try to, fulfill that dream. How I learned about it, because I hadn't heard of it either, is I mentioned my brother Bob came here to the University of Minnesota as a scholarship running back. After a couple of years, he hurt his knee. They recruited a running back named Marion Barber Jr., who was pretty darn good. Not too shabby. So long story short, Bob transferred to St. Cloud State to finish his career there. And his roommate, who also was on the football team, was a guy named Larry Peterson, whose dad happened to be Bob Peterson, the Hall of Fame SID at the University of Minnesota. So my mom and dad would go to the St. Cloud State games. They'd sit with Larry's mom, Bob's late wife, Joy, at the games, and they got to talking. And my mom and dad came home and said, "Have you ever heard of this job called sports information?" I said, "No." Yeah. So I called Bob Peterson, BP. Yeah. And that's really where it all started, where I learned about it. I got a scholarship as a cross-country track athlete to go to Minnesota State Moorhead, and a small scholarship. But a big part of that was not only to be to advance my running career, but also they had a Hall of Fame sports information director at Minnesota State, Larry Scott, who's still a great friend and great mentor to this day. So as a student athlete there, I also had a chance, when I had time, to work as a student assistant and a student intern under Larry Scott. And that's kind of how it all started. Right out of college, I interviewed with BP, Bob Peterson, for when Lou Holtz was hired here at the University of Minnesota. BP, because of all the increased exposure, was given the green light to hire another assistant sports information director. And I interviewed for that job and didn't get it. And I was devastated. But it was the best thing for me. And I went to McAllister and became the sports information director, my own office. It was an office of one.
One-man shop.
Yep. And coached a little bit cross-country and track there. And then after a couple of years there, that job opened up again here at Minnesota, the assistant job, and I didn't get it again. And then I got involved with the Olympic Committee. It's like anything in life. If you're not getting something that you aspire towards, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. So I said, okay, I need to do something different. I got involved with the U.S. Olympic Committee, worked a number of U.S. Olympic Committee events and with USA Basketball, and it led to me working the Olympic Games in Barcelona. But during my early years with the U.S. Olympic Committee, I got to know and work alongside the Villanova Sports Information Director, Craig Miller, another great friend and great mentor. And his assistant job came open, and then I left McAllister, interview with Craig, and went out and was at Villanova. So after McAllister a couple of years, Villanova a couple of years, my Olympic experience, the third time the assistant sports information director job opened at Minnesota, BP hired me. Okay.
Third time's a charm.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then 5 years in, BP retired, and then I got the job that I aspired to, which was being the sports information director at Minnesota. The administration stuff, assistant SID, associate AD, assistant AD, associate AD, senior associate AD, I hadn't planned that for much further out.
Yeah.
Those things just happened by being surrounded by really good people, great colleagues. Mark Diener, who I had breakfast with this morning, was the AD at the time, and Mark Diener had great belief in me. I'll be so thankful for Mark forever for the trust and belief he had in me to help me take that next step in my career.
Yeah, that's pretty. It's funny. You got to be one of the few people who say, "I want to be an SID" in your senior writing. But it's amazing that sometimes just again, it's who you know, what connection it is. Your brother's playing with his teammate who is the guy in charge here, and you learn more about it, and you're like, "That's a job that's for me." And the next thing you know, 36 years later, here we are, right?
Well, you like I say, when you're listening to Ray Christensen on the radio, you're going to the games, you're experiencing the rouser, your brother's on the team. I just knew I wanted to be a part of that. I'm not a pro guy. I watch pro sports, but I think there's something special about college athletics and frankly high school athletics too. Certainly college athletics are still tethered directly to higher education, and I think that's what makes it. What differentiates it. And the college experience is so much different. So I knew I wanted to be a part of it, and then when I found out a way I could be a part of it, I went after it.
Yeah. I told you this before, but you remind me, one of the things I admired most about Joel Maturi in his time here was the connection he made to all the student athletes. He went to all the home games, and I think over his course of time, I think he said he only missed one or two, and it was a conflict of something. The golf was going on at the same time as something else. But you think about that, and again, demands are different maybe even now than it wasn't that long ago Joel Maturi was in charge here. But the connections he made, he knew everybody. And even in the short time we were here before we taped the podcast, there's 4 or 5 people out there, and they're all, hey, Mark, hey, I remember this, that. So I think you learned under him, and maybe you helped each other in terms of how you guys viewed that. So a few weeks ago, I had Kostas Zaltos on the podcast, right? And I said, you're from Greece. You didn't learn to speak English until after high school. And a year later, you're here. How did that all happen? And he, gave, the coaching staff credit. And the second thing he said is most of it is due to Marc Ryan. That's got to be, to have a student say, I wouldn't even be here. And it was like top of mind. It wasn't like a afterthought. And then he mentioned your name 2 or 3 more times within the podcast, just talking about his background and how you have helped him. And he's one of, I'm sure, many. Now, in his case, because it was an international situation, one, what's that make you feel like when you hear these folks tell you what kind of an impact you've had? And 2, tell us about his story specifically in terms of the challenges of getting an international student here and into school and into class and doing what he did, a national championship a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, right?
Right.
Kostas and I had lunch a couple of days ago, and he's a special individual. It's like I told him, I said, you're a special person, Kostas, and it just happens that you're also a world-class athlete too. That's the icing on the cake. So it's been really, really special to be a part of his journey in some small way. And I think the world of that young man. It was really special to be in Eugene a couple weeks ago when he won that national championship. He had been close 3 previous occasions, and came back this year for one reason. For several reasons, but one of the most important was he was going to finally win that NCAA championship. Agilos finished second.
Yeah. His
countrymate right behind him, first, second. It's never happened before in Gopher history in track and field, a 1-2 finish. Just really incredibly special. One of the challenges, probably the most significant challenge with Kostas, in addition to, being an international student athlete, was he, given his schedule and academic calendar, so he was a mid-year admit. And at that particular time, mid-year admits, international, were a little bit more challenging. And so at the end of the day, I would say I think it worked out pretty good. Worked out pretty well for Kostas, and worked out pretty well for Gopher Athletics and University of Minnesota. Not only is he a national champion, thrower for us, but here's a young man that student athletes in just about every sport, probably across all our sports, know who Kostas is. He was very involved in our SAC, Student Athlete Advisory Committee, our international student athlete group. Just a guy who immersed himself not only as an athlete and as a student, but in all aspects of Gopher Athletics and with his fellow student athletes. So just really, really proud of him. He's a special guy. And certainly the hope is that he'll be competing for Greece along with Agilos. Agilos is definitely already in the World Championship this summer. They're in Tokyo in September. Kostas is looking pretty good to be there as well. And then, of course, both those guys want to, be in LA in the Olympics in 2028. So, hopefully good health and so on and so forth. Both Kostas and Agilos will be throwing the hammer, compete at a real high level for many, many years to come.
No doubt. And I think his story is a good one to end the podcast on, an hour longer than I said. I said, hey, Mark, how about 35 or 45 minutes? Around an hour 43 and running. But that's what 3.5 decades of experience and firsthand stories and different things can do. But his story is one of hundreds probably over the course of your career, but it's most recent, it's impactful, and I just thought that was a good way to end our discussion here, was his story and the fact that he was so adamant multiple times to credit you on
special
his
young
journey.
man,
Yeah.
special young man. And you mentioned earlier that we saw some just in the Athletes Village here before we started the podcast, some athletes and staff, and had some nice visits. And I introduced you to Deandra Gray, right? Another international student athlete on our women's team that just had a phenomenal senior season and made it all the way to Eugene in the NCAA finals and capped off her career in just perfect fashion. And now she's going to be an intern in Gopher Athletics. Another program that I'm really proud of is our Gopher Athletics internship program, and she'll be interning in event management. And looking forward to following her career, and this is a great start for her too as well. So really, that's what makes the journey so rewarding, and like I share with you, I've just been really, really blessed.
Boy, it's been fun. I know you won't be a stranger. Stop up in the radio booth and see Daryl and I, or Al Nolan and I in hoops, or wherever. But enjoy a tailgate, right? Enjoy a tailgate this fall.
Absolutely. And hey, we didn't get a chance to talk about Daryl. I mean, talk about one of the all-time great people. Great people and great Gopher athletes. And but I'm looking forward to that. I might have an adult beverage or two before a football game this year. It's one of the things that I haven't been able to do in the past, and just really looking forward to it. So I might take you up on that visit up in the booth, Mike.
I will say, one of my favorite Marc Ryan stories, and you don't know this one, is we go to North Carolina for football. Was that last fall or 2 falls ago, whenever it was? And so we're going out to dinner, and I think taking an Uber, and I looked over, and there you were sitting outside outside of a restaurant, ready for that game. I do think you traveled on your own that one, though. That wasn't a business trip. You just wanted to go enjoy it. So that was pretty cool. I'm like, Marc Ryan's here. He's taking a road trip.
Our trip this year is going to be Oregon.
Yeah.
Which will be a real special environment. We're actually, I'm a big Wrigley Field Cubs guy.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to make that trip, because that'll be, with their new stadium, which sounds like it's just going to newer, renovated Ryan Field.
Yeah.
No relation.
Named after you.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. But I'm guessing that, they're probably not going to play many, if any, games at Wrigley Field moving forward.
Right.
And so really want to be there and be a part of that. So that's our road trip
this year.
Trip. Yeah.
See the Gophers at the friendly confines.
Darn right.
Yeah.
Darn right.
Well, very good, Mark. It's been a pleasure. And I know you won't be a stranger, but it was fun. Like I said 35, 45 minutes, but there's such great stuff. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate all you do for Gopher Athletics.
It's episode 177, the Go Gopher Podcast.
Wow, what a fun trip down memory lane with the great Marc Ryan, one of the true nice guys in college sports who did so much over the years for Golden Gopher athletes and for Minnesota in general. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed being a part of it. Episode 177 is presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com. We're also partnered with Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, a locally member-owned full-service financial invested in you. You can learn more at affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. That's affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. Affinity Plus also has an award-winning mobile app, so check that out. OnX Fish also sponsors our show. Happy fishing this summer. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and please right now click that subscribe button to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to subscribe and free to listen at any time. And please share the link to the podcast with others so they can subscribe and listen as well. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please let us know with some positive feedback on your social media channels. We'll talk again next week.